So my name is Shrikant. I'm the editor for Express Computer. We are part of the Indian Express Group. It's my privilege and honor to welcome all of you to this special conference, if I can say that, on best practices for DevOps and ITSM. We are, in coordination with and in conjunction, in association with Altation and Addteq, we are doing this event. So, we have speakers, expert speakers from both these firms here. Please make sure that you can catch with them for any inputs what you want with respect to DevOps or ITSM principles. So without wasting any time, firstly, thank you. A warm welcome again to all of you. I'd like to welcome first on stage Mr. Patrao, Regional Channel Head, India and Southeast Asia, Altation, on the stage here. Yeah, come here.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much. I'd like to start off with saying thank you so much for coming out today. We were in two minds about having a face-to-face event. We weren't sure if this would actually be a success. People would actually want to come out and meet each other after COVID. So this is the first event that we've been doing after COVID, and India being as resilient as it is, and Bombay being probably the leader in resiliency when it comes to things like this, we were sure that it would work out, and I'm happy to see so many of you here. I manage the channel ecosystem for the Southern Asia region, which means India and the countries surrounding it. We've got Julian Newman, who heads the Indo-Pacific region also. He was supposed to do the introduction today, but unfortunately, it's his first time to India. So I took him to Delhi, and I took him to Bangalore. So dust, and then rain, and now humidity. So he's lost his voice. So he's still standing there. He's at the back there. He's waving out, saying hi. But this was supposed to be him up on stage, so I'm just stepping in for him. Thank you so much for coming. I'm not going to take too much time. There's one thing that I did want to talk to all of you about is the Atlassian community. We've got a very strong chapter for the Atlassian community in Bangalore. Very, very good participants from across different customers and customer bases, partners, and Atlassian people. The community really helps everybody in the organizations, whether be it partner, Atlassian, or with the customers, in growing. And someone asked me, what would I get out of it? And this is what I say, and sometimes it's probably better than what I'm saying, but for every 1x that you put in, you're getting 3x more information from the community. So my request to the people over here is have your people, it may not be the right thing for you to do, but urge your teams to get into the Bombay chapter of the Atlassian community. If anybody wants the link, I can share it with them later. But essentially, that was the one point I wanted to make. Thank you so much again, and I'm going to hand it back to Express, and they will kick off the rest of the session. Thank you.
So thank you, Carl. I think this was a short and sweet address. I'd like to straight away start on with our panel discussion. So, while we have chairs up here, chairs been dropped up here, I'll just read out the names of the panelists. We have Dr. Avadhut Parab from CIO from Parle Group. If you can join me on stage, sir. We have Mr. KRC Murthy, Head Retail Technology Banking, Kotak Mahindra Bank. We have Mr. Shiju Rawther, CIO SBI Mutual Fund. We also have Mr. Scott-Goh Davis, Head of Solution Engineering, APAC, Altation. And we have Mr. Anoop Nigam, CTO Addteq. Some energy, you can welcome all of them with a round of applause. Thank you. So we've got a diverse panel. We've got some good experts. We are going to, while I have my questions, like I've told each of the panelists, not necessary that we stick to the questions. We can make it more interactive. So my first question, we're going to open it with a warming up kind of a question. So I can start with any one of you. Okay, KRC, I'd like to start with you first. But what are some of the biggest challenges, KRC, to develop? What are some of the challenges, what you see as a CIO as a role in CIO, specifically from the pandemic to the times what we are now?
Good evening, everyone. Thanks, Shrikant, for having me here. And when you say experts sitting here, there are veterans and experts sitting there. I'm a little worried when you say experts sitting here. It's only that we will share our perspective. That's what. And we have lots of things to learn from the audience also. I think we have been talking, right? Pandemic has thrown a lot of challenges to all of us, right? The entire cultural shift of how things work has changed across the globe, right? Otherwise, we would not have actually thought of looking at things in a different perspective altogether. Be it remote working, things can work, wherever teams are, If you ask me, currently my team is scattered across the country now, and they have still not returned back, and my production support runs, and they are able to run it. So, otherwise, in a normal course of action, I would not have thought about it. I would say, come to Mumbai, and this is the place of work, this is the office you have to work, and you have to travel for 3 hours a day, and you have to spend your entire energy levels there. Whether you work in office, what productivity, I don't care, but you have to come. Yep. No, but that entire mindset change has happened. I think every one of us, agree to it. The second one is, the kind of push which the digital initiatives have got in last 2 years, Shrikant, it is tremendous. Absolutely. I think all of us agree, various initiatives took the front seat, and suddenly the IT from the back bench has come into the front bench. We are in the limelight. Everyone starts respecting what an IT professional does, and we used to do the same things earlier, but the kind of recognition which came in last 2 years and what these guys can do and turn the tables. There was no physical interaction. People couldn't meet each other in person. The business has to go on. How do you do it? There's only one team who can do it, that's the technology team. They have the tools, processes, they have their innovative thought process, how to do it. I keep talking again and again, but I would want to say, we wanted to do business. KYC has to go on. We were the first bank in India to launch the video KYC right during the pandemic. We developed in 3 months and we launched it and we did it. Those kind of innovations have to come out, So many things took, the fast route. I think the timelines were crunched. It's a great period. I especially, I feel blessed to be, there in this era where I have seen that kind of acceleration.
Fantastic. So, Shiju, your perspective, please.
Good evening, everyone. I think I would totally agree with KRC on the same page. But moreover, I see there was adoption of agility, because agile was the one thing which has been adopted more during this period. I think I had been struggling since last decade to go for an agile in the organizations, but this was an auto adoption which has happened, because everyone has to work in different geographies, people were ready to work in different time zones, collaborate with each other's, and respect each other's time durations also. So definitely there was a lot of adoption which has gone through at this point of time. Moreover than adoption, I think innovation has happened. A lot of new innovative ideas have came through. How do we bring in more collaborations? How do we bring in more sort of new technologies which we can deliver more and more digital touch point to the customer? So that was the one thing which has come during this point of time. Given the last 2 years, I would say that was an ever examination period, because the hard work which we would have put in over the last many years had resulted us by making us to shift from office to work from home. And I think that was not overnight or over the week. It was the years and years of the hard efforts, as well as the investment from the organizations that made us succeeded over the last 2 years. So I would say it was a tremendous job which everyone has done from the technology point of view, as well as the technology business point of view also, because adoption was one of the key point out over there, where the users started learning. It was not a hardened, but they also started taking interest of it. So, and it's a continuous journey which we'll have to do over the period of time, building more scalable platforms, bringing more sort of new technologies which can bring in an end touch point to the end point of the customers too. So I think it's a continuous evolution, and we may have to be ready for any sort of pandemic, because we have seen the worst now. We don't know what could also hit on the way in future. So we have to be ready and agile to make ourselves more stronger and fight against these sort of pandemic.
Fantastic. So I think one word you mentioned specifically, which is probably a key aspect which is going to be there for us in the future, agile. So I'd like to come to Scott now and ask him, as an organization, how have you dealt with this change? And probably some of the solutions, how have they evolved to kind of meet these challenges?
Yeah, sure. So just to start off, I'm based in Australia. And one thing that comes to mind for me in particular was waking up one morning in March in 2020 and getting an email saying, our office is closed, don't come in. So to your point in IT kind of coming front and center, becoming a really critical, even more critical part of the business, literally overnight, I totally agree, because we did things that many of our customers went through as well, right? We broke our VPN. We had issues scaling with people working from home globally. And so with that as the context, I think in terms of that organization being agile and really fine-tuning and making very repeatable and scalable their own processes, that happened in very short order. And so major kudos to the IT departments for being able to sort that out. Not that that isn't enough of a challenge, but what I've seen as a larger challenge for Atlassian as an organization is that even with all the macroeconomic factors out there over the last 2 years, we've still experienced tremendous growth. One of the stats that I shared with someone earlier was that 50% of the employees now at Atlassian have never physically touched another Atlassian. And that's how many people we've hired in the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. We source them online. We interview them through Zoom. The offers are digital. Their laptops are sent to them. We onboard them online, which has a whole method of back-end activities on the IT front in terms of how that has to operate. And that's great. Yeah. But also, as I was just having a chat before the panel started here, for those of us who have been on board for a while and had the benefit of being able to work with people face to face and really establish that team culture and cohesion, that's great, because you can take that back with you working remotely. But for the new hires, it's very difficult to replicate in a virtual environment. And I think, honestly, being brutally honest, that's something that we still struggle with trying to get right, because there's no better way of doing that than in person, and that's something that we're still sorting out. So nice to see that those controls are coming back off and we're able to meet in person again, finally, in the US, in Australia. It's changing in other countries as well. We're able to do events like this, finally, for the first time in almost 3 years. Right. But that is one of the lingering challenges, I think, is that during that intervening period, we had to figure out how to make those new employees feel just as bedded in as those of us who have been with the company for 5 years.
Yep. Good. It's very interesting. So Dr. Avadhut, I'd like to come to you now. You've been predominantly in the pharma industry. Compliance is a very strong point. Like we have seen, processes have been disrupted completely. What we used to see in the past, siloed offices, controlled environments, everything has gone into chaos. So specifically from a compliance point of view, since you came from that environment, now you're a part of a major FMCG group, how do you see this change from a challenge perspective? If you can share your view.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I think my fellow panelists has already said what we have experienced it. One of the important point, the mindset had changed. And when I say mindset, is the ask towards that is change. Earlier, there was a discussion used to happen, if I go this way, what kind of risk is there, what kind of issues will come. So, but today, the ask is, I want it. We were running after the business operations, business people, can we do this, there are new things coming. But the reverse flow has already begun. And the good part of it is they have created unrest among the IT team or IT department or so-called the team. So that's a very good thing which has happened. Otherwise, this culture wouldn't have changed. So that's first, the mindset. Otherwise, the IT team generally takes years to change. It has happened naturally. That means that's something which is good for organization. Now coming, of course, I'm 3 months old to FMCG industry now, Parle Agro. But before that, I served along with pharma industry, where compliance was taken as a roadblock. Compliance was a big inertia to overcome. And when suddenly the office main doors were closed, you were forced to, as a business continuity, you are forced to see how well we can align compliance to the wants of today or need of today. And this is not with an organization, could be a workout or anybody, but even regulators said that we will accept this change. And that is where the adoption of many of these tools, many of the electronic way or digital way, we just adopted. And otherwise, in pharma, we call something called validating what you adopt. But here it is, when a regulatory body says that you're free to do some kind of faster adoption, move from the typically life cycle approach of validation to a minimum risk-based validation. So with this, the embracement of the many of these tools have started coming in. People have started accepting the which earlier were negative to a positive. So the whole move from the paper to electronic has started much faster. So, and compliance just embraced it. So it was a good change for the industry, and we see now for an industry of pharma or regulatory, process was a parameter, but suddenly data became a parameter. So that's the change we see, and that has opened the adoption of many new technologies. That's a very good sign which we see it, and I'm sure with this change, we see another 2 years where the pharma industry was laggard in cloud adoption, which you see every new initiative is, people feel that they should go on a cloud. So I think that's something which good thing have happened to see from inertia, resistance to adoption, and the mindset had changed. I think that's a major change we see as a part of the COVID.
Got it. Thank you, Dr. Avadhut. So I'd like to start off a new thread with you, Anoop. Purely from an adoption perspective, what do you see are some of the cultural, process, and technological challenges? You've dealt with different organizations. How do you see that change happening?
Good evening, all. Hello.
Yeah.
Good evening, all. Thanks, Srikanth. So basically, it is more of a cultural change, which, or what would I say? It is more of a cultural barrier, mindset barrier, which actually broke during this pandemic area, and that actually enabled us to adopt the disruptive innovations actually. And not only, the technology front, from cultural and even from process aspect as well, a lot of adoption has been performed. Earlier, Agile, not only vanilla Agile, but also safe Agile was, or scaled Agile is now being used and being adopted from a process aspect. From a cultural perspective, now responsibilities are being shared among the team members across functions. So earlier, there was disparate functions which were working in silos, and now that particular mindset has changed. And now we have more of cross-functional teams, and that includes specialists from different functions, and that has proven effective actually in all the deliveries. So mindset is definitely one of the barrier, and which actually got broke, and we now have in a much better state at this point in time, and that even basically enabled us to adopt new technologies, so which are more aligned to current mindset, current processes. So yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you. So KRC and Shiju, you've been from the BFSI industry, one of the most dynamic industries, wants to adapt change. You set the standards for the rest of the industries to follow. So Shiju, if I can start with you first, how do you really see the mindset being broken, applications being developed at a much more faster pace? What's your perspective?
I think the mindset depends on the deliveries, how do you perform, and what all the outputs you give it to the business. So it's up to you, how do you go back and talk into the business language. So one of the thing what I've seen between the technology guys is that we always talk about technology, but we never talk on the business language on the technology. So I think the one thing, the change, what I have learned during the pandemic also, and been talking with my team also, that now let's start talking the business, so that business can look themselves as one of them, us one of them, and probably they can start talking to us more closely in terms of what sort of requirements, what sort of their needs, and probably before they think, we can go back and put forth some sort of solution in front of them by saying, hey, look, this is the solution, or this is the product, or this is the platform which we want to suggest to you, and probably this will bring in some sort of revenue back to the organization. So unless that sort of mindset we bring in out onto the change and start working onto that, the collaboration will not work. And I think that's the biggest change what has made during this pandemic. And every day, the technology team start thinking like a business team now. So that's how you become, rather than the cost center, become the profit center out over there. So that's the one thing which is getting changed within us. And when we talk about this, you have to set out the process also, how you make it, or your agile framework, how you put it up, the DevOps, which I'm sure which we'll discuss on the later steps. But now we have to change our from a CIO to CIBO. So we should tell ourselves as Chief Information Business Officer, because we are selling the technologies, not selling the technologies, we are selling the solution and services to the business, wherein business rides on us. And that's how we talk about taking the front seat. So we always keep talking about taking the front seat, but unless you talk and you become a part of the business and business adopt you, you will not become the CIBO. So let's look upon to become a CIBO rather than be a CIO out over here.
So how do you re-engineer, I mean, this is a follow-up question, and I'd like KRC also to comment on that. So how do you re-engineer, I mean, you have fixed set earlier, you have to re-engineer or back of the envelope calculations to hit that goal or objective within the short timeline what the business demands. So what are some of the steps, Shiju, that you'd advise to crunch, or like Anoop was describing some of the practices, cross-functional teams working together more collaboratively so the timelines can be crunched. So what are some of the recommendations or advice you would like to give?
I think it's a learning which we'll have to do in terms of understanding the depth of the business processes. So what we do as a technology guys, I have seen always the team work on their own platforms, their own system, their own functions or units, and they want to champ out over there. But how many of us would have taken an initiatives to go and understand how does the business flows work? What all the challenges and what all the pain points do they have? How they can reach out to the more customer from the business perspective, wherein technology can do a value addition. I think that's a learning which we'll have to do. And we should make at least a compulsory time phase out in a week where we spend good enough time to understand those processes on the ground level or at the business level. So wherever it may be. But the understanding of the business is very important for us. So though we understand the business, I'm not saying we don't understand the business, but what the processes they follow on the field, we should know each and every step before they keep telling us, this is the processes what we do. And I think that's the change which we should bring it out, because we are master in technology, and we will be, I'm sure, and we will keep learning the technologies, but understanding the business is very important out over here. And that's the disconnect happens, because business says something that I want to put it up, this is the way. They're in technology pitch in and say, no, this is not the way you can do it. Third, information security team will come in, they no, you cannot do at all. So both of them get stopped out over there. So as a technology CIO, you will have to get into it by saying this is the better way to do it. Right. And this is the way you will be reaching out to your end customers, you will be reaching out to your targeted new potential customers, or you will retain the stickiness of the customers. Right. And I think that's how we will be able to say we are on the front seat.
Got it. KRC, your perspective?
I've learned some new terminology from your Chief Information Business Officer. I like that, Shiju, and I can't agree more with you. It's a perennial problem with the techies. The way too good in their area of work, but exactly as you mentioned, I'll completely agree. They don't wear the hat of business and think from their perspective. Sometimes I also face a challenge. A burning issue which is there, for example, the branch had sensed that something is burning, I need an urgent attention. This guy would say, please raise a ticket, let it come. I have got my SLA, I'll do it. But you don't understand that a guy standing at the branch is abusing the manager, and there's a queue there, and you need to understand, what kind of support he requires, and you need to be there are some exceptions, right? So they don't wear the hat of, the business guy and understand what's happening. That collaboration has to be there, that mindset has to be there. Once you have that, I'm sure that guy will turn into a 360-degree professional, who understands business, who understands technology, who can empathize and sympathize, and that's how people will grow. I keep telling my team, I try to mentor them that this is the way to go ahead. Otherwise, you are a very good techie. Where will you end up? What do you want to really do, But in any case, that's a different story altogether. I can go hours and hours on that. So, but anyway, Shrikant, coming to this thing, mindset change, yes. The timelines have crunched, Shrikant. The business now doesn't have patience, right? Yeah. And the new products which they want to launch, we don't have enough time. 6 months, 8 months, 1 year, gone are those days. It's like they talk fintech, Look at fintechs. When they can do it, why can't you do it? What is it that they are doing differently? Mm-hmm. Look at the Amazons and Googles and of the world, and they are much more learned now. Business guys are like no more that they come to IT guys and they will listen to whatever we say. No, they come and teach us technology today. So they are always trying to be one step ahead. So you can't fool them around. So they have very much learned. We don't learn business, but they learn technology. That's how it has happened nowadays. Fantastic. Right? It is completely a different ballgame altogether. If you are not able to service them on time, what they want, you're out of business. IT guys can't put their collar up and say, I'm an IT tech professional, nothing. There are hundreds of people who will come and replace you. Simple. Be there or be left out. So that is one, the timelines have got crunched. The innovations have to be there. As he rightly said, think business, think what they want, go proactively and tell them. They will love it. You become their partner. Instead of being a service provider, you become partner. Sit with them, next to them as a partner and deliver the solutions. I think there's lots to do. A lot of people don't do that, right? So, always look out for what's there in the market. What can I do? One step ahead, look at the competition, what they're trying to do. Be there, build products accordingly. During the pandemic, all the applications, all the channels, I'm telling you, it has been completely stress test. I really loved it. We built so many things, but are we actually using it? Be it mobile banking, be it net banking, be it many channels which we have given. But people still somewhere want to have a touch and feel and kind of, but they were forced to get onto the digital channels. I was very happy. It was completely stress test and my applications were working, my channels were working. Business was very happy. For the buck I put in, I've got my ROI, right? So they understood, yes, this is the time, where it was a payback time for us. Had we faltered, the entire team would have been changed now. I wouldn't be sitting here.
Fantastic. Scott, your perspective, since you're, from a global perspective, how do you see the change what Mr. KRC and Shiju just described?
Yeah, it was interesting as I listened to what you've experienced, and I totally agree in terms of expanding the purview of individuals at an IT level and understanding the business sides and the drivers, getting a bit closer to that. I'm going to take a slightly different trajectory, though, because surprise, surprise, being from Atlassian, I think of how do we action this, I think of Agile, I think of, without getting into the products, it's not a sales pitch, but in terms of the methodology and at a team level, how that occurs, I think many of us would agree that Agile or some variation of Agile is how that would happen from a bottom-up perspective. And I agree with many of the pressures and restrictions that you two have both indicated. What I've seen, especially across the APAC region, is where that hits friction points at scale when you're approaching a level of safe operations, for example. What I did hear kind of woven into a lot of your descriptions was this was really more of an IT thing to sort out. Agile is for the dev teams. Yes, maybe they need to understand the business a bit more, but it really is more for the techies to sort out. I would argue that if you really want to do Agile at scale, if you well and truly want to take on board, for example, SAFe as a methodology, you also have to change top down. It also means you have to look at budgeting differently. You have to look at program managing differently. You have to, honestly, as a CXO, you got to give up a little bit of control, and that freaks people out. And I don't think most organizations really, truly internalize that until it's a bit too late. And the complaints I hear from the IT side when that happens, when there's that disconnect bottom up to top down, is they'll say things like, we tried to go agile, but it turned fragile. And that's not the place we want them to get to. So I think just be aware of the top-down changes, especially as you grow that out and look at really ramping up that approach.
Thank you. So I think a lot of points were raised, but one important point what Shiju and even KRC mentioned on the security part, I think Shiju mentioned it first. So I'd like to start with Dr. Avadhut now first. What is, like KRC is mentioning, the speed of change is so rapid that, you need time. Earlier you used to follow certain principles from security release, you had to test it out completely, but you don't have the time now. So how do you ensure that your applications are as secure as they should be, without compromise? You release applications fast, but the security should be foolproof. So what are some of the best practices that you would recommend?
Yes, the whole approach towards the development to operations have changed. And largely, if you see, as KRC mentioned, every project or every enhancement has become a backward scheduling approach. The date is fixed, somebody says, I want it in 3 months, so that means you have to do everything in a backward scheduling. So with that as a mindset, you know the start date, you know the end date now. So you'll have to operate between between this interval. Now, which means the whole process of development cannot be a sequential. It has to be, something has to go in parallel, and you need to get into a break mode. It can't be just, I'll complete everything and then hand over. So the approach has to be we call it, of course, the sprints and all. So you break the whole problem into what is the priority, how much you can, when you can give this, so that you get into an inclusive and engaging approach. Earlier, what is to happen is we do everything and then hand over to user, he will do everything and then come back. Yeah. So it was a sequential. So now you are saying it, now I am the whole problem, I am breaking into a small stories or so-called sprints. I start using the users not at the end, but in between. And this particular inclusive approach, maybe you use a tool or use a framework or use a principle, doesn't matter. But as long as your process is there, and they also allowed, because now you are involving them from inception to the operations. Yeah. So what matters for them is, are you really involving them from day one, or involving just test this kind of thing? No. So this is the first change which we see it, and I think it's going to sustain. And the only way you can more and more automate it, bring the tools, so that further you can crash the time and these administrative or communication and collaboration can be broken down using some of the automation process. So that's the approach which is going to sustain going forward.
Yeah. So Anoop, I'd like to have your perspective on what Dr. Avadhut just described.
Dr. Parab very correctly said, actually. So one of the reason which I see actually is there is still a separate function for security, and they act as a separate function altogether. Right. And they are not yet being inclusive into our cross-functional teams from the day of inception, actually. And that is what actually is causing the delay. The delivery team is actually doing the development, doing the testing, getting it ready. And at the end of the road, they are handing it over to the security function to do all the security testing, compliance testing. And that end of the road actually becomes a roadblock if any vulnerability occurs in that case. Right. So inclusion of security guys or security aspect is required in the delivery itself from inception, as Dr. Parab correctly said. That is very much needed. And obviously, it has to be a shared responsibility. Things has to be shifted towards left from inception. The other thing is basically to have, separate security group would definitely be required. Hackers are finding, every day, they are finding a new ways to break into the system. And obviously, somebody has to look into what are the new ways which came into. And obviously, that's a part of the security expert. Security function would definitely be required. But it has to be a shared responsibility where day-to-day activities, day-to-day development has to be shifted left towards the developer side as well.
Good. Thank you. Shiju, you've been a CISO, so probably you know this field better than most of us do. What's your perspective?
I think the complete schema for development has changed over the decade. So what I have seen in my earlier days when I started my career with Satyam Computers, Wipro and Patni, where I was a coder, that point of time, so advantage I come from both the side of the tables, and wherein I have served with service industry for quite a period and then moved to the captive within the financial services. So at those days, the developments were not so disruptive like the day today. And at moment, I remember when we had to deliver something on the requirement from the business, the expectation was something, say expectation was of apple, and we developed pineapple. Now finally, when it served to the table, the whole expectations went wrong, which has changed over the period of time now. So Agile has helped a lot, and I could see there are a lot of ownership which comes from both the side of the table. It's not only owned by the business, not only owned only by the technology. There are modules which gets delivered on the sprints basis, and that's how the new terminology has also got introduced between dev and ops is sec, which we call as a DevSecOps. So anything what we develop today, it's go under first it is design. So that's how the security is been middle of both. So it manages both the side of the table. It manages the development as well as the operations. So before the development as well as post the operations. And the whole security framework as a design gets into the part of the development. So now today developer is also equally responsible for checking back into the code, quality codes. So there is a team which will be there part with them. But I'm saying it's a part which was not there. I don't remember during my days it was there when we used to develop in C and C hash and all. So there is a huge change and shift which has gone to the whole DevOps process. And I think that's also leading towards making more in terms of the security piece. Though we call up more in perimeter security and all, that's a different piece all put together. But the biggest vulnerable things happen inside the code, because once it gets compiled, no one knows what it runs inside, where the stored procedures calls to, what sort of APIs it's calling to. So it's very important you do everything from the foundation level and bring it on a very secured way. And I think that DevSecOps is playing a vital role out over there.
Fantastic. I think it's a very wide aspect. Security is a broad topic. Obviously, you can go deep into it, but thanks for bringing that perspective. We also have a separate session on DevSecOps, which we'll take it up further. Now I'd like to come to Anoop now. Anoop, remote working is like the norm today. It's not an exception. Ticket volumes have kind of substantially increased, but you have the same IT ops team, to handle. So, what are some of the best practices that you advise from, to manage this workloads?
So basically, if we see, all thanks to Agile and DevOps, customer expectation is set pretty high nowadays. Market is obviously very competitive. Customer wants all the services to be always on. Faster deliveries are there. As and when the companies are actually expanding, they are adopting more and more new tools and softwares. So obviously the workload for the IT ops guys keep on increasing. And if we see, the pandemic area, a lot of distributed work model actually came into picture, and that has actually accelerated a lot into the workloads which IT ops guys currently goes into. What I feel is basically the reason for all this, the workload which actually got enhanced for them, is basically most of the companies are still operating into the traditional ITSM model. And they're not able to actually compete or basically lag behind as compared to the agile development which is currently happening. And if we see from an IT ops guy, if we see there are many requests which are kind of repetitive requests, maybe unproductive for the IT ops guy, which actually can be reduced by having some certain kind of pointers given at the right point time to the requester, where basically he can go directly and resolve the issue or fix the issue, basically, get the job done. So kind of self-service, if we can create, knowledge base we can create and have a self-service given to the requester itself. So one of the aspect is that. Other aspect is we can have certain automations in place, certain bots, virtual assistant kind of, so which Kotak has actually very nicely implemented. So most of the requests can be filtered out at the very initial stage, and only the real problem or the issues lands to the IT ops guy. Yeah. So, but if we operate with traditional ITSM, even IT ops guy face challenge at that point in time as well. And why is the case? Basically, the information is scattered for him. We use multiple disparate systems. Information is distributed among those systems. And when any issue occurs, he's in a very tight deadline. Always. He's working after SLAs. If he has 1 hour SLA, 45 minutes of SLA, he has to figure out all the needed information, which should be handy at that point in time in a single screen. He has to go back to various stakeholders, to go back to various platforms, various softwares, to look into to get all the needed information actually. So all those aspects is actually a challenge for IT ops guy, which kind of can be solved using Agile ITSM. There are various tools and platforms available for Agile ITSM as well. The other aspect can be where basically adopting SRE practices, hyper automation, even RPA, remote processing, many things can be automated from a self-healing perspective as well. So let's take an example where if at all, I know a known issue where basically a screen freezes up when CPU hits certain percentage. So probably before becoming that as a issue, what if my system auto-heals that? It kills all the old processes and get the system running altogether. So all those optimizations has to be performed. Now those optimizations can be performed from the existing processes as well, and obviously by adopting Agile ITSM as well.
So how real is this world? I mean, I'll hold on to this question. I'll ask Dr. Avadhut, and I'd like to ask Shiju and KRC also. How real is this world? Is this possible today? Are there still gaps that you feel are there in current ITSM?
I think it's very much practical, but it's a slow process. We can't expect everything will change. A simple approach is your own ITSM as a platform or whatever software you use. It has to be seen as a more of a knowledge management and not as a something called a platform where I'll get a solution always. I'll pass on the solution to someone else. You know, so that's one area where some intelligence can be given. Whenever he or she puts the request or something, there should be intelligence in the system, which is quite possible today. With the if you have the good repository, to auto get some kind of address or that's one. Second area where the objective is not to solve, but to really take care of the genuine problem, and that's where the I would say the training part. We said if intelligent can be said, okay, the answer is there in my repository, give it, and it can be also supported. Okay, refer this document for more and more things. So. More and more assistance with the change of culture, okay, you need to adapt this, is something very important. Intelligence is really playing a good role today, where your artificial intelligence, automations, and we have seen the systems are there in the practice today. But going to the extreme end where I know if I'm getting 1,000 requests, it'll suddenly go to 50, it'll take time. The third point is we have to also remember that in a culture where we work, in an organization where we, or especially in India, informal CRM works better than a formal CRM. Right? That's a fundamental thing. Whosoever the user, he'll prefer lift the phone, boss, ye problem aa raha hai, can you just help me out, and kind of thing. So we have to keep it in mind that informal CRM may not go irrespective of what that's an habitual. So we need to tackle between these two. How do we get these people aligned to the new way of working, or you change from the newer generation, give them this option. So it's a mix and match option. Technology is definitely going to answer it, but If there is adoption is slow, it will take that much time to travel.
Got it. Yeah, Shiju.
I think I would totally agree with Mr. Parab also. But the challenge in any of the organizations today, most of the ITSM tool, and I'm sure everyone will have the ITSM tool, whomsoever speak out over here, everyone will have the ITSM tool. But how much the usage and consumption of that, we may not be able to, I'm saying, very justice or do justice in terms of weightage, how much is the usage of that tools happens. The biggest challenge is that when we build our structure, technology structure, we never put anyone skilled out over there who will be champing out over there. So now this has to be continuous, evolvement has to be there in terms of making more user-friendly, making someone to adopt. Those sort of things has to be pushed by one team or one person or one champ within the organization, which we always fail to do so. Most of the time what happens, it will be in hands of the tech support team, wherein they will say, I have been told only to do all these things, only to perform all these activities. Now, over and above, if any innovation has to be brought out, that never happens. And after a few years, it gets sunk, and then someone will take a call by saying, no, this ITSM tool doesn't work at all. But how much time have anyone invested onto that by making more features, bringing in more, I'm saying, solutions, upgradations? No one work onto that. How many of us, if we go back and see, do we have an ITSM champ within the system? Who will only exclusively work on the tools and solutions within the organization? Who will only work on with a KRA that adoption should be higher out of that? So, and we keep saying that user doesn't use it, user doesn't use it. We have never sold them. We only write emails to them by saying, this is the process to adopt tomorrow by saying, send the ticket, I'm saying raise the ticket through the portal. This is the link, this is your username, password. Now we have made it more sophisticated by adding it with the AD, so it's a single sign-on. So that's the convenience we do it, but we never go back to tell them this is all the features which will value add to them, or I'm saying that's the lack where we fail. And most of the ITSM tools will become redundant out over there. I'm sure everyone will agree about it. And that's the failure, because we doesn't plan these skill sets on the right place at the right time.
Yeah, probably I'll come to Scott for that probably rejoined or what your perspective. But first I'll ask KRC on his perspective.
I think he took away all my points. I don't know. You read my mind or whatever. So, but it's a vast subject.
Yep.
Srikanth, ITSM as a whole, it's an ocean by itself, right? As he rightly said, we buy the best of the tools, right? Best of the functionality available, but do we put it to use is point one. As he rightly said, do you have a champion who drives it to the right end state? No, and it's a continuous improvement, right, which you have to get in. Are we trying to do it? Coming to your question of the number of tickets rising, people working from home and kind of thing, we all have witnessed that, and it is there. What we try to do, differently here, Srikanth, what we have put in is that when a user calls in, if the user can do things by himself, we train the user. We tell them, okay, I'm on the call, please start doing it. And believe me, a lot of users liked it, that, I've learned something new, now I can do it, right? Only other than where admin password is required, this guy has to key in, leave that part. But otherwise, many of the things the user can do it. Simple things, train them, tell them, next time this comes, don't call me, you can do it. What we have also done, Srikanth, differently is that, if a user is calling me more than 5 times for the same problem, I charge back to the business. I go and tell this is a MAC charge which I'm going to, put it on you. Why? The business tells me if I withdraw 5 times, more than 5 times, if I withdraw, it will be charged from an ATM, right? You're not giving me a leeway. So if you call me more than 5 times for the same problem, I'm going to charge you. And trust me, users have started learning it. You have to put some controls there. See, I'm not trying to penalize you, but I'm trying to educate you. Don't bother me for something which you can do, you are aware. Just because, as you said, there's a number available, call up, IT team hai, karega. No, it is not. I'm not here for free of cost for you. You have to keep educating them. Tell them how to do it. Train them. Also, we have put in, few small things. If your AD ID is locked, from my mobile there's a link. I can go there. I can put my AD ID. is it locked or you forgot your password? There are two options. You choose one of them. You have a dual factor authentication. OTP comes, you put the OTP, done. You can change your password. 3 minutes, you are done. You don't need to call or wait for 15 minutes for the ID to unlock automatically. No, you can just do it on your fingertips. Provide these small things. There are bots, as you rightly said. I put 105 bots in last 1 year, which does lot of things. If it used to take 45 minutes, 50 minutes, they just do in less than 30 seconds, right? These are the things which you have to get innovation. I'm working on putting a bot on the desktop. The moment you click there, it starts, learning that, okay, you called up the service desk for this issue. Are you facing this issue? It's a machine learning built in, right? So then it gives options. These are the options. Okay, these are the steps. Just go ahead and do it. It talks to you, and it starts conversing with you. So you'll love it. So these are some things which we need to do it. Otherwise, there is no end to it. You will put 100 people, 200 people, 300 people. It's a never-ending thing. So we'll have to start thinking over it. Charge back your users. You will love it.
Fantastic. I think there's several nuggets of knowledge. ITSM Champ, for example, what you said about charging back to the Scott, your perspective on, there's a certain way probably Indians do things. So just want to hear your perspective.
Yeah, sure. Wrapping around a couple of different threads that I heard, and primarily a couple of comments that Anoop made initially. And just as a lead-in, so you couch this in the context of remote work in some way, shape, or form, whether it's hybrid or permanent, is here to stay. And as a preface, Atlassian is one of the major technology companies where we've implemented a team anywhere policy. So all of our staff, for as long as they want, if they, like I do, if they prefer to work from home, that's fine, work from home. If you want to go to the office, like some of the people on my team, go into the office, it's completely up to you. We don't dictate one or another. But that does put increased importance, obviously, on the tools that we use, many of which IT support. And so quick question, just by show of hands in the audience, I'm curious, how many use like Slack in terms of one of their tools for communicating across the company? And how many use Teams? Wow, I'm way outgunned on this one. All right, so big Slack fan. I've been used to it for quite a while. But either way, you get the main mode in which you use that. And one common thread that I heard throughout some of these comments were variations on changing that user behavior in a variety of different ways. One thing that I experience directly every day in Atlassian is I don't view Slack as just my messaging console. I view it as like my command console. I do everything in Slack. I approve expense reports. I can look at travel itineraries. I can actually have an interaction with IT and automatically have a ticket generated and kind of conversational ticketing without even leaving that tool. Now on the back end, of course, it uses our own service management product. But the main point is that using that specialized capability in the product that we're using from another vendor, we're able to meet users where they are. And I think the extent to which you can really push it to the glass, it helps change that behavior, because I live it every day and I love the fact that I can just do it right there. I don't have to log into another portal, and even though it might be all fantastically configured, it's still a different system I have to jump into. So I think that's a huge advantage, is pushing that out there, because you're right. Internal customers, employees, their expectations are quite high. And rightfully so, especially as we're working from home, especially for us, like for the unforeseeable future. I think that's going to continue on for at least as long as I'll be here.
Yeah. So quick point, I think we covered a lot of ground. Just I'd like to quickly ask all of you, future of ITSM in your own words. KRC, if I can start from you. What would you like it to be, rather than, like somebody also said, I do agree with the point that it's not a tool. You need more user behavior and probably to drive it. But apart from that, if you want to see, how do you want to see it?
As I said, it's a never-ending journey. ITSM is like a vast subject. How you perceive it and how you want to actually implement the tool, it's all up to you, right? I want it to be a self-sufficient. Don't depend on the IT guys for some things which is very simple and you can do it by yourself, right? And start thinking innovative and make it lucrative for the users also, user-friendly, that, this is not something which I'm scared of. I love to go to this tool. Make it so interactive that, people would want to actually interact with that tool rather than, picking up the phone or sending an email or tagging a ticket. Make it so nice, juicy for them to go, okay, this is the go-to tool for me. I love it. That's how kind of thing. Otherwise, you buy a Maserati and then take it on the JVLR, then that's how it is, you know.
Yes, Shiju.
I think it's a continuous improvement and the continuous journey forever and never-ending story. So it's more to be more self-service. I think that has the, and I see during the pandemic time, lot of the status on the WhatsApp was on terms of videos for cooking. So I think people have learned cooking, seeing the videos on to the YouTube. Similarly, I think the self-service has to be more from visuality, which we should come through the ITSM, wherein I think the self-service will get more enabled. Also, human is more changing towards the bots now. So I think that will become more and more, and the dependency on the people will be reduced. So that doesn't mean we are taking out of the job from the people. They will become back-end, but front-end will become the bots. So that's how it will become more self-service, and that's the output what we are looking from ITSM tools now.
Fantastic. Scott?
So I totally agree with many of the comments in terms of near term, having a lot of that deflection through additional capabilities, whether it's bots or any other underlying analytics in particular. I think, and we're actively working on this for our own solution, that midterm, longer term, that we will be able to incorporate additional levels of AI so that we really move the ITSM system from one that's more reactive to something that's proactive. I mean, how cool would it be if just like something happened behind the scenes because they knew there was an issue with your laptop and you received a new laptop without even knowing there was ever a problem, right? And that's a bit futuristic, but I mean, you can see how you can link that together because all that information's there. So having AI across that can connect all those data points, and rather than wait for you to raise something, simply you'll just flag it with you. It's really not that far-fetched. There are other solutions that do similar things, so that's something we're very actively working on right now.
Fantastic. Dr.
So every organization is very unique in adapting with respect to the culture. So I think if we take that point into account while we make the attempt towards it, that will be more, I would say, successful. That's it. And then people, when they go to visit that, they feel that they're learning something new every time. So it should be okay.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
So I think the focus should now shift from the over-prescriptive process to more of customer value-driven process. Yeah. And even this particular need has been seen by even ITIL framework as well, which is a very renowned framework for ITSM. So they have launched ITIL version 4 in, I believe, 2020. And if we see their definition, they are actually focusing more into, customer value driven in a more holistic way, actually. So I believe, yeah, that's the way.
Okay. So I think I come to the end of the panel discussion. I think, like Yair says, it's a vast topic. We can go on and on, but obviously we have time limitations. So I'd like to bring this panel discussion to a close, and would like to thank all the panelists for a very enriching and I think a free-flowing interactive discussion. I'm sure all of you appreciate the insight shared. If yes, then you know how to appreciate it. So thank you. Can I ask you to pose for a group photograph, sir? All of you. Thank you so much. Thank you. So again, thank you, each one of you, for sparing your valuable time to be part of this lovely discussion. We now begin with the fireside chat. I'd like to again call on stage Mr. Scott-Goh on the stage. Yeah, wherever you want to say. So idea is to keep this free flowing. While I have my set of questions, Scott, you don't need to stick to this. You can kind of take it the way you want. And if anyone of you have some specific questions for Scott, you could ask them. We'll come and give you a mic.
So it's open season now, is it?
So what do you think, Scott, your prediction on cloud adoption and the Atlassian view of things, if you can say, from a meeting new customer requirements?
just general cloud
Yep.
adoption?
Yes.
I would say one of the things that I've noticed, especially in the last year within Atlassian, is that as we continue to raise the bar on things like not only new functionality but user counts, we're definitely talking to more larger, more complex types of migration scenarios.
Okay.
And very broadly speaking, people are leaning in quite heavily. I think, and you heard this a little bit in the panel discussion too, there was this sense of everything that we've been through for the last couple of years really acting as an accelerator. A lot of things that we had kind of toyed with and thought maybe we would do at some point.
Right.
When you get an email on a Friday morning saying, don't come into the office,
Right.
all of a sudden you have to make that stuff happen straight away.
True.
And so I've seen a lot of those, I've seen a lot of that thinking of if we'll implement these technologies and if we'll move to Atlassian Cloud, for example, literally overnight changed to when and how, and okay, we're comfortable. Yes, we need to check certain compliance and security and other types of boxes, but let's get going in earnest now. And I've seen that continue to just move up, especially as we expand the capabilities of our own platform.
So what kind of features or what kind of, how has Atlassian Cloud itself evolved in the past 2-3 years? And
Well, at a platform level, quite a bit, especially in terms of the multi-tenant architecture, but probably more relevant feature and value-wise is just the expansion of use cases, in particular for managing all types of work.
Yeah.
So obviously, when you think Atlassian, most people think Jira, and in particular, when you think Jira, you're talking about Jira software and how
Right.
that's used by Agile teams and managing that type of work. But Jira actually exists in a few different forms. So there is Jira software that covers all of the Agile activity. There's Jira Work Management now. It used to be called Jira Core, but Jira Work Management has been repackaged and it's really designed for managing a variety of other business activities for HR, for finance, for legal, for example. And then there's Jira Service Management that does a lot of the ITSM features that we're talking about as well. And I think we're able to really cohesively manage and coordinate a lot of that in some interesting ways, especially when you look at it through a DevOps or a DevSecOps lens. We're able to really bring a lot of velocity to that in some unique and interesting ways as well. And we're continuing to expand that sphere of influence.
so how are your customers reacting to this? You've seen this evolve, cloud evolve. What has been the reaction from the customer's point of view?
In terms of the cloud itself, or the
Usage
solutions?
and their advice in the adoption, for example, or how they adopted this. Is there any feedback, any recommendation for,
Yeah, I mean, broadly speaking, I'd say the adoption is going quite well. We have been able to, especially over the last year, really generate a lot of assets so that we can get customers across that pretty quickly. We have, for example, a full suite of control documents on the security front so that when we're having that initial chat with a customer, and we know that we're going to have to engage with their security team, I can hand them all those control docs. I can answer a lot of questions on how we operate. I can immediately get them much more comfortable, especially if they're already familiar with infrastructure services like AWS, because we write on top, and that becomes a much easier chat if that's something they've used already. So we have a lot of documents out of that, whether it's at the technical level for the security guys, for really helping to assess their current state on-prem in terms of extensions and customizations and applications that they've leveraged in there as well. In addition to just kind of a starter kit along the lines of how do you structure your core migration process? What's the kind of the best practices that we've seen? And that provides a nice cornerstone, but really the key ingredient for making that successful, especially at scale, are partners that we have within the region as well. So partners like Addteq, for example, who bring a lot of value in terms of understanding how to connect those dots and making some of the best compromises to navigate through the bumps that you will encounter, because at the end of the day, it is a migration. There are potholes on the way, and partners are best suited to help really navigate around those so that you don't get trapped.
So are there any big customer expectations or gaps that your specific cloud has addressed from your competitor? If you look at your competitors and there are any gaps that you addressed, if you'd like to highlight that?
Yeah, I mean, there are certainly areas where we can improve, and there are a number of data points that we've taken back and reprioritized with our product team. Different ways in which, especially at scale, we need to, for example, be able to manage users, different ways in which the IDP is actually set up in a centralized or
Okay,
decentralized.
sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I meant the question in a different way. I said
go ahead.
the gaps from a competitor point of view,
Oh,
which you are
competitive.
capitalized and, from an Altation point of view, where your solutioning or like you said about the migration part, are there specific features that you develop where, it is a competitive advantage over your competitors?
Sure. So just to set a little bit of additional context there, and this is where I got a little bit lost before.
Sorry.
Usually when we're talking about migrations, we're talking to customers that are already using the product, and it's not so much a competitive factor. It's how do we take Jira and Confluence on-prem and move it into the cloud?
Got it.
The areas where we do get on more of a competitive footing are areas like ITSM is probably the biggest one. So what are the differentiators there? Well, the fact that we can blend that in as part of the overall DevSecOps picture, as I mentioned previously, it's yet another variation of Jira that we already have, so you're familiar with it, you can integrate it directly. It is set up to manage a lot of the ITIL processes that Anoop was talking about earlier, with a particular focus on areas like incident, problem, and change management types of activities in some really interesting ways, whether it's on the back end with products like OpsGenie to do some really cool alert types of management and workflow and massaging, or on the front end, like I talked about, with being able to push out that interaction directly to the glass through different messaging tools, which is actually an underlying component called Help, was an acquisition that we made as well. So those are some of the differentiating angles. But having said that, and living true to our own values, right? For anyone who is aware of our 5 company values, one of them is open company, no bullshit. So, our Jira Service Management Suite is not designed, nor will it ever be designed to do, for example, everything that ServiceNow does. That's not the objective. But that subcomponent of most of the ITSM types of interactions that we do well, and we plan to further differentiate with some of the capabilities I've already mentioned, as well as some of the AI and analytics that we're actively building into the platform at present.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's what I'm doing. We talked about ITSM in bits, but from your perspective, how is Agile ITSM really different from the traditional ITSM?
I would say the biggest difference with Agile ITSM is the way in which it is yet another data point that integrates to all the other work that we're managing. So within the Jira suite of products, one of the things that we commonly think of is a couple of things. Firstly, doing that in a way that's fairly open. So whether it's in whatever variation of Jira or Confluence, by default, the information is there and publicly accessible. And of course, there are security settings if you need to lock that down if it's sensitive or whatever reason. But by default, and this is true for us internally as well, you can see that constellation of information, and it really allows you to integrate it in different ways so that you can take full advantage of this notion of data velocity inside the company. And that holds equally true for Agile ITSM as well. You can start to do some really interesting things by looking at that as just another extension of Jira, so that you can blend it in, especially as you're looking at things like not only just production rollouts and reporting back issues once something has gone out the door in a DevOps paradigm, but being able to feed that directly back in so that engineering is aware of it, and perhaps even alerting people, again, through some of the new analytics that we might build in more of a proactive way, so that you can really look at that as more of a cycle versus kind of an endpoint.
Got it. So India, as such, is an exciting market, as you are, both from a developer point of view, huge software services market, a lot of big IT vendors, IT services vendors who are catering to a global market. How do you see your presence in India, and how do you see it going forward?
I see our presence continuing to grow. So actually, I just flew up this morning from Bengaluru, where we were at for a few days. We have a solid office presence there from when I first visited it, I think a few years ago. It was less than 100 people to, I forget, I'd have to ask somebody else the exact count right now. I think it's several hundred, and that spans areas like support, in particular support, as well as additional types of channel support, pre-sales, technical types of capabilities, including a portion of my team for the APAC region as well. And we continue to make investments there. I think I mentioned at one point that I was hiring quite a bit, and that extends to this market as well. So we definitely view India as part of the APAC region as a key area where we're doing more than just speaking about what we want to do to it, but we're actually putting dollars and resources and headcount in country as well.
So would you look at R&D and other stuff also being developed from India, product development also?
Yeah, I can't speak to that directly. I suspect we might, but I'm not across what that would look like for us. Yeah.
Got it. But overall, you see India as a bright spot in the overall space.
All I can say is we wouldn't be flying all the way out here if that weren't true. So this is actually something like my 9th trip over the last few years to India, and there's a reason why we keep coming out here. We think it's definitely a market that we want to more fully monetize.
Right.
So yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. I think we can keep on asking Scott a lot of questions. Some of this has already been answered in the panel discussion and even now. There are one or two questions if I can take from Scott. Yeah, yes, sir. Can I have a mic, sir? Sorry, one second.
No, I don't need it.
Okay, fine. Okay.
We can hear you.
Yeah, thanks. I heard throughout the evening a lot about ITSM. I didn't hear much about DevOps. So is it different, or is DevOps and ITSM integrated? Is Agile ITSM a different name for DevOps? I would like to understand more on the DevOps part.
Yes. I'll give my personal opinion, and I'm sure other people might arc up and have different opinions on this, so I'll just preface it before I freak anyone out. My own personal view is when you're looking at strictly the development component through different types of agile capabilities with Jira, to how you extend that out and ultimately deploy things through DevOps, to looking at specifically the operational side of that through ITSM, I really view it as an evolution of the same thing. We're just extending that chain to do more and more and more. I know some people will take issue with that, but that's just kind of the way I think through in terms of building out that continuum. So to answer your question, whether it's DevOps, DevOps 2.0, ITSM, Agile ITSM, it's really just layering onto that continuum, at least at a high level. I know we can split hairs in terms of what one versus the other means, but I really view, especially the operational side of DevOps, or ITSM is really building out the operational side of DevOps in particular. So yeah, I personally wouldn't get too confused or too wrapped around the axle about that, yeah. Yeah, good question, because they all seem like maybe different things, but I think there's a huge amount of overlap.
Thank you. Any other questions? Do you have any other questions? Okay. So I think we're fine. Thank you, Scott, for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. So now come to an important topic which we alluded during the panel discussion, a specific session on DevSecOps. I again have the pleasure of calling Anoop back on the stage.
Hi all, thanks for the opportunity to speak in this particular forum. I've been asked to speak on DevSecOps, which is quite a big topic in itself. And I have given only a couple of minutes to actually do that. So probably I'll try to cover it. Hopefully I'll try my best. So security, need of security we see, it is obviously a no-brainer. It's been of prime focus since almost a decade. But in nowadays with agile deliveries and fast-paced deliveries happening, it becomes quite a importance. So if we see the stats over here, these stats make us feel otherwise. So we see every 39 seconds, cyber attack happens. And if we see most of the breaches or the target institution is basically financially motivated. So 70% of the breaches are financially motivated. And major of the organizations which are being hit, obviously, if it's a financial motivated attacks, in that case, healthcare, financial institutions, those are of prime target actually. And if we see the data from IBM study, so they say 329 days, healthcare and financial industries have the longest data breach. So that particular data breach is basically the time when a particular vulnerability is being open and not being faced. So the average cost of this particular breach, if we have a 200 days of breach time, in that case, it almost cost to almost $5 million. 43 of those breaches were actually from a customer-facing or internet-facing applications, so on web apps. And 23% of the data breaches were caused due to human errors. So what these stats shows us, what basically is the challenge? So there are quite a few challenges. Obviously, if we are doing fast-paced deliveries, in that case, there could be two reasons actually. If we are doing fast-paced deliveries, we have certain target in our mind. We have been given certain targets that I have to release by this particular due date. We try to just release the new features, new functionalities, new softwares into the market without actually realizing the importance of security, or maybe by compromising security. The second reason could be basically we have a separate distant function, security as a separate distant function, which they work in silo. So the developers basically, the development team basically, they develop the application, they release the application, and before they test the application, before releasing it to production, they hand it over to the security team. Then security team, they do their own analysis, vulnerability checks, scans, penetration testing, and compliance analysis. And if they find any vulnerability, in that case, it again goes back to the circle actually, to the development team as the backlog. So the cycle time which is required for that particular fix is pretty huge. It's pretty long. So maybe some of the teams basically just to skip that particular long cycle, they simply release it and do certain kind of security checks, security testing at certain intervals, maybe quarterly, maybe 6 monthly or annually. And as and when, I mean, obviously if we have the longer period of open vulnerabilities, that would definitely cost and are more prone to attacks, definitely. But to fix that particular cycle time, if it is been identified at a longer duration of time or late in the cycle, it obviously cost us also, I mean the delivery team also, to fix those errors. Another challenge which companies face is basically they have multiple teams and they all are following different practices. They are not consistent in their practices of adopting security or running the CI/CD pipelines. One of the important aspect which is being overlooked by many of the teams as well is the use of open source. So, I mean, in last few years, the usage of or adoption of open source tools is pretty high. It's everybody's favorite actually. But they actually overlook whether those open source libraries, dependencies, or those tools are, how much secure they are. Are they vulnerable? Even for our day-to-day development also, we are using a lot of libraries, open source libraries, third-party libraries. Do we do checks on those particular libraries as well? So one of the example, I believe everybody must be aware of, which happened last year, is the attack or vulnerability which occurred in Log4j library. If somebody have heard, yeah, right. So that was pretty huge actually. And Log4j is very common library. It's been used by almost, I mean, it's been used by since decades actually. So when I entered into the industry, I was using that particular time. So it's pretty old. And so those misses happens, not deliberately, but it happens actually. And it is the duty of not only obviously, I mean, okay, so what should be the solution? Obviously, it has to be a shared responsibility. Security can't be a responsibility of single function or single group. It has to be a responsibility of everyone. Being a developer, it is my responsibility. Being a tester, it is my responsibility. Being a DevOps team, it is my responsibility. So it has to be a shared responsibility. Everybody must take care of security from their aspect. Now, obviously, I mean, as I said earlier also, hackers have their own way of breaking into the system every now and then. So everybody has to be aware of what all new ways are coming out in the market. And if we say that being a developer, it is my responsibility. I'm not a security expert, right? I'm just a developer. So we need to ensure that developers are not security experts. They are helping you to get the security in line for everyone. I mean, for every function except the core security functions. Security functions are the experts. So they'll keep upskilling themselves. It is their core responsibility to upskill themselves, know the trend, what are the new ways coming out by the hackers into the market to break into the system. And that's where basically, if we see continuously update of security checks comes into picture. So they upskill, they kind of govern and make the decision, okay, this is kind of new vulnerability which came into picture in recent times. And every member, every application team has to follow and adhere to this particular practice. The next thing is basically we have to be consistent across our delivery pipeline and the security checks which we do. Obviously, I understand basically if we say I have an application team which uses mobile application, I have other teams which don't have any mobile application. So why would I do a mobile testing? Obviously, we don't. So there are certain parameters, certain type of testing which has to be baselined across all the application teams. It has to be consistent across organization to a certain extent. Now, obviously, on top of that, additional number of scans, additional number of testings can be performed. And obviously, as I said, open source vulnerabilities are the most easy to hack into, actually. So we have to have certain set of scans to be done on open source libraries as well. So we have actually, I just wanted to show a case study which we have done for one of our clients. So we have done this for a particular bank, and that particular department approached to us with a problem statement of they have actually a very high rejection rate for their compliance, and also a longer time they are taking to fix those vulnerabilities. So we did a kind of discovery session with them. We tried to identify what are the problem areas which they are facing at this point in time and why they are into this particular stage. So what we discovered is they have a team structure which, again, as I said, it's a separate security group they have. They have their CI/CD implementation done in most of their applications. One or two applications, again, they are inconsistent. One of the application is doing certain code scans, that's it, static code scan, not any dynamic code scans or no vulnerability checks. And rest of the applications are not doing almost no scans actually. They are simply doing build, deploying. They have CI pipeline basically. Now what happened is basically, one of the reason is obviously, I mean, they don't have any consistent function group actually to perform consistent approach. And they were not doing any security testing. And most of the applications are kind of, some are database applications, some are web application. So what we have done is we have suggested them to do a shift left of their practices, which a security function was doing. So we said, okay, you take the guidance from them. You have the basic list of checks which you have to do. So we suggested them to do three type of scans to start with. One is SAST, security static analysis for security testing. DAST, dynamic analysis for security testing, and FOSS analysis, that is free open source security scans. So those three we have suggested to them, and what we have told is get them integrated with your CI/CD pipeline itself. So you have certain set of checks to be performed, and obviously, I mean, we got a counter from them. Okay, we have different kind of systems. Not all the checks are applicable for application A, not all the parameters are applicable for application B. But then what we suggested basically baseline those parameters. You baseline those parameters, okay, I'm doing SAST and DAST scans. Out of 100 parameters to be looked into, okay, at least 50, we all can agree across the department that these 50 are must-have scans. And we have actually rolled it out, implemented for them. And in addition to that, we have also implemented a auto rollback functionality. So if at all, so what we have implemented is we have integrated the scans at 2 levels, both at the feature level as well as at an integration level. Now, if at all any scan fails the integration point, it auto rollbacks. So you have the integration branch almost, it's consistent without any vulnerability. And the tools which we have suggested for this particular case actually, for SAST we have integrated checkmarks, for DAST we have integrated NetSpark, and for FOSS we have integrated Nexus IQ. And with this, they were actually able to fix the vulnerabilities 5 times faster, and their rejection rate was reduced to almost 60%. And this is one of the case study which we have implemented. I mean, this is one of the implementation which we have done for DevSecOps. There are many others which, with other technologies also which we have done. For GitLab also, with GitLab also we have done. So I mean, that depends. There is no one-fit-all solution actually. So we have to look into the industry, what is their need. Every organization has their own need. So we have to look into what exactly that particular organization is needed, and accordingly a solution is provided. So if at all, I mean, if a particular customer has their on-premise, they are already using GitLab. In case, obviously, we'll prefer to continue using GitLab and get those integration done. And if a particular customer is trying to onboard or basically trying to shift altogether to a new platform, let's take an example of Bitbucket Cloud. If they are looking for Bitbucket Cloud, if they want to go to Bitbucket Cloud, we would prefer to have all the integration being done. It has a very seamless integration with many security tools. It has its own pipeline also to get it deployed. So CI/CD pipeline was there earlier also, and now we have security also embedded into that. So there are many integrations with Sync and many other security tools as well, which can be embedded into Atlassian Bitbucket tools also. So I believe, yes, that is what I want to cover. So if at all anybody has any questions on this or want to connect, probably I'm available over here. We can connect any point in time. Thank you.
So we covered a fair bit of ground. I think it's a vast topic, like our panelists were saying. We covered mostly every topic, under these subsets, DevOps and ITSM. But experts from Atlassian and experts from Addteq are here. In case any one of you has specific questions with respect to some of the principles, some of the practices, techniques, technologies to be discussed, you want more inputs, please feel free to interact with these experts. I would now like to call upon Mr. Surinderpal Singh Kumar, CEO and Director at Addteq, on the stage to give his closing remarks for this conference. Welcome, Mr. Singh.
Thank you, Shrikant. So I'm very happy to see all of you. I think I was a little suspectable that I think audience of this size will turn up during this pandemic and at the peak traffic hours of Mumbai. So thank you for coming in, and I think I really enjoyed the panel discussion. It covered a broad range of topics. Right from, I think what I liked was the business is very impatient, the workloads are increasing, we need integrations, we need automations, but more importantly, we need to move towards predictive customer service, predictive support. So I think thank you panel members for all the insights and for sharing it with our audience. And with that, I would like to close this and thank all of you for coming in. And thank you, Scott, for coming all the way from Sydney and addressing us. Thank you.
So there's no more speech left. We're closing this, like I said, but I mean, this discussion should go on beyond this forum. I mean, the whole purpose of meeting physically is unlike Zoom, where we can just switch off and be on mute. The whole purpose is being physical. You can interact a lot more, be more expressive. I think that's the value of human relationships. So with this, I'd like to, call upon each one of you to please join us for, dinner and cocktails, and make sure that you interact with each other. Thank you.